All right, chat. I'm not gonna lie, I was muted last take, but shout out to And1 Hoops. We're gonna be watching this video. It's called "The NBA Supermax Contract: A Disaster Waiting to Happen." Obviously, if you watch basketball, watch the NBA, you know how dangerous the Supermax is now. But we're gonna watch this video, and link will be in the description. Let's get into it.
When the NBA implemented the Supermax contract in 2017 as part of the collective bargaining agreement, the contract itself was designed to keep NBA stars loyal to their franchises and to give teams the most leverage and ability to retain their stars. It was yet another attempt to reward teams for drafting well and offering their stars the most incentive to stay with their team and not simply move to a bigger market or a better situation to a team with other stars. But in today's league, some might call it a trap, one that can hamstring franchises with little way out. Is it a blessing for small markets? Hell, even for some of the bigger markets in the league, or a curse that handcuffs teams for years? Because thus far, in just the 8 years of the NBA Supermax contract, there has been more regrettable deals than success stories under the Supermax, and it does make you question if the Supermax is actually hurting teams in the NBA more than it does good. So in this video, we're diving deep into the world of NBA Supermax contracts, how they work, the pros and cons, and whether they actually help or hurt teams and players alike. Be sure to subscribe.
So before we get too far into the video, I think the Supermax is good. The big issue with it is that like he said, it just handicaps teams. It can be a big team that gets handicapped. Yeah, we just gotta see, bro. Because the problem is there's so many good players that are coming into the league, but it's like they get the Supermax and now you can't really sign anybody else. So you kind of see that not really with the Celtics, but like you have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum on the same team, and they're both getting a bunch of money.
Subscribe if you enjoy this type of content, though, as it really does help me out. We are nearing 100,000 subscribers, and I do very much appreciate it. Now, the reason this whole topic piqued my interest, because we've obviously known about the Supermax contract for quite some time, but after we learned that Cade Cunningham was selected to the All-NBA third team, which triggered the Rose Rule provision where a player who makes an All-NBA team, still on their rookie scale contract, entitles them to what is the equivalent of an NBA Supermax, even though it's not called the Supermax, as that's designated for veteran contracts only, which I'll explain what that means in a little bit. But the Rose Rule essentially allows teams to increase the value of their stars' rookie contract extensions from a max of 25% of the cap to 30%. And because Cade Cunningham got the All-NBA nod, his rookie max contract extension went from a 5-year, $224 million deal to now $269 million, an increase.
Which, that might not seem like a issue, but the Pistons, think about the Pistons, bro. They can't really sign anybody, you know? Like, that 5% is like, it goes a long way, bro.
$45 million over the life of the contract, which represents the bump from 25% to 30%. And while some will say, well, what's the big deal? You're talking about a player making $8 to $10 million more a year under this bump in salary for a player that is an up-and-coming star, a franchise player for the Pistons. Well, normally this wouldn't be as much of an issue under the old CBA, but like I discussed in my last video, the implementation of the new luxury tax aprons under the new CBA really limit what franchises can do to get the requisite talent around their star players.
That's the biggest issue, though,
25% to 30%
the biggest issue
of the cap, especially when you draft well and end up drafting multiple star players. Simply put, teams can no longer afford to keep their star players together while being subjected to the major penalties of being over the second apron. So in this case of Cade Cunningham, it actually is wild to think that your franchise player, your young star, making All-NBA at just the right time before their contract extension kicks in, is now a franchise-altering disaster. Especially
it's like
when we know that
worse.
all the Pistons' young core are all going to need to be getting paid soon. But even more insane, Evan Mobley, after winning Defensive Player of the Year, just like Cade, will also see his rookie max extension go from $224 million to $269 million, a deal that went from 25% of the cap.
But it's like you have Donovan Mitchell and you have Darius Garland and you have Jarrett Allen. Like, you have just too many good players for these Supermax bumps, you know? You have too many people under the new CPA.
To 30%, all because he won Defensive Player of the Year in a year where Victor Wembanyama was clearly the best defensive player in the NBA, but
until he got injured,
prevented him from reaching the 65-game minimum rule. The Cavs will now have to pay Evan Mobley an additional $45 million because
Which if
Wemby got
Wemby
injured.
wanted, then the
Now,
Spurs
taking a
have
step
to.
back for
Like,
those wondering
it's
what a
just like,
Supermax contract is, this is officially known as the Designated Veteran Player Extension, which allows teams to offer their own players significantly more money and more years than any other team. There are a number of requirements, though, to qualify for the Supermax in the NBA. You have to have 7 to 9 years of service in the league. You must have made All-NBA, MVP, or Defensive Player of the Year in recent seasons. And if you're able to do all these things, then you're eligible to earn up to 35% of the salary cap. Like I mentioned, it was introduced as a way to prevent small market stars from jumping ship in free agency. Think Giannis or Damian Lillard, both eligible and both received Supermax contracts. Now, I should be clear, the Supermax isn't all that bad. There are positives that have come from it since it was implemented.
yeah, like that team gets to keep their player because they can offer the best contract. But at the same time, it's just, I don't know.
8 years ago. Because for both players and teams, when it has worked, it's worked really well. Supermax deals, of course, reward players who stay with the team that drafted them. It's a powerful incentive to build dynasties at home. It's great for team control and continuity. Keeping a superstar long-term provides stability. You can build around them, attract talent, and maintain a team identity, something that is great for the league, especially at a time when stars were moving from team to team chasing championships.
Katie.
Supermax money, because the contracts are so much, where you have deals going for over $300 million these days, it is hard to walk away from that as a player. So even if a player is unsure about the team's overall future, when you throw a massive bag at them like that, it makes them think twice before bolting for, say, LA or Miami. But as much as the Supermax contract is a positive from a player retention standpoint, there are more downsides to the deal that have caused more problems for teams in the long term. Because a Supermax contract can become a franchise's biggest burden. First off, it's obviously a cap space killer. When one player eats up 35% of your cap, it limits your ability to sign supporting talent. One injury or a sudden decline in play and your flexibility vanishes to be able to build for the future. See the Philadelphia 76ers as a prime example of today, where you have two players on max contracts, one being...
And then you have Maxey, that's like a really good player, but then you also have Jared McCain that's going to do good. Like, man, it's like the new CPA really did kill super teams, to be honest, which a lot of people wanted, but it also just, it killed a lot more than that, bro.
A Supermax contract in Joel Embiid, and while both players are all NBA level talents, they have not been able to stay on the court, and the Sixers now have little flexibility to build their team for the future, especially if Embiid doesn't come back as the same player and Paul George continues to decline. Staying with that point, I mean, you already have numerous examples already of superstar players getting paid Supermax contracts as veterans, and they then decline, which basically leaves dead money on the books of the franchise that signed them.
Yep.
The contracts, generally speaking anyway, are always fully guaranteed. Whether the player gets injured or the star starts aging and declines, they still get paid that money. Teams can be stuck with contracts that no longer match the player's production. Think of players like John Wall, who hamstrung the Wizards after he was no longer the same player he used to be post-injuries.
John Wall,
and then a couple years later, Bradley Beal, who got his Supermax deal with a no-trade clause. Both players were good at the time that they signed their deals, but they were not top 10 players.
And then it's like, look at the Wizards now. Like, they have Kuzma and Jordan Poole. It's like, it's just like, it handicapped them. Like, they aren't going to be good for a while. Like, not to say Kuzma and Jordan Poole aren't good, but those are, like, backup characters. Like, those are players you have under, like, a Curry or a LeBron. Like,
league level good, and both players who started falling off after signing those contracts. Both players who were good enough and met the eligibility criteria to receive Supermax contracts. Now, of course, the Wizards were eventually able to get off both of those deals by buying out John Wall and then trading Bradley Beal. And now you have the Suns stuck with that contract with no way out and limited flexibility to improve their team, despite having two other stars on their roster in Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. How about Russell Westbrook, one of the top players in the league, MVP winner in 2017, gets his Supermax contract shortly thereafter and then falls off and is passed around from team to team before he's eventually bought out of his deal. Damian Lillard.
But it's like, it's just Westbrook has always been the player he has. Like, he has never been like the guard that just goes and takes a bunch of shots. He's always been the facilitator. I'm gonna get these rebounds, pass the ball. Like, that's just always how Westbrook has played. He's always been a very inefficient point guard.
You know, while still an insanely gifted player, a superstar in his own right when he was in Portland, The Blazers rewarded him for his loyalty and being their franchise player and staying with the team despite never really contending. And then Dame.
But the issue with Portland is that they didn't do anything. They did literally nothing. And then Dame finally leaves after his base quote-unquote prime. And, like, the Bucks are, like, not as good. But the Bucks could have went far in this playoffs. You know, like, I don't know.
Eventually asks out of Portland. And now you've got Lillard on his Supermax deal with the Bucks, suffering a major injury at age 34. And now the Bucks have very few avenues to improve their roster.
Exactly.
And build around
That's
Giannis.
the big
so
issue.
Much so that most believe Giannis will ask out of Milwaukee this summer.
I don't
now,
think so.
Now, the other major downside to the Supermax, because while the goal of the Supermax is to retain your star talent, you also have to be mindful of still maintaining their trade value should you need to pivot. Once a star signs the Supermax, their trade value becomes complicated. The pool of teams willing and able to take that contract is few and far between. And this doesn't just apply to Supermax contracts, but max contracts in general. Under the new CBA, teams are always going to be hesitant in taking on large sums of guaranteed money when the consequences of having a high payroll are so great. The team has to be sure they're getting a player that is going to be productive relative to the contract amount. Of course, there have obviously been success stories with Supermax deals. Giannis led the Bucks to the title in 2021. He's a multi-MVP winner, is arguably a top 5 player in the league. Steph Curry changed the Warriors franchise and built a dynasty for that organization. Nikola Jokic, arguably the best player in the league, multiple MVPs, won a championship.
On his way to be the best center of all time at this rate. Goodness.
In the NBA landscape, megastars, consensus top 10 players in the NBA. When it's a problem is when you see non-superstar level players who happen to make All-NBA third team for one season get rewarded with a Supermax deal and never produce at that level as one of the best players in the NBA. And then the teams are stuck footing the bill and setting their franchise back for years. You have the spectrum here, right, of championship foundation players to long-term anchors that sink rosters. So where does the league go from here as it relates to handing out Supermax contracts? 2023 CBA tweaked the rules to discourage teams from hoarding stars and overspending, but the Supermax still remains. As penalties get harsher and harsher, teams may become more selective in handing out those deals. Should every All-NBA player get a Supermax, or should teams reserve it for top 5 level talents only? Perhaps the league should revisit the rules and requirements for being eligible for the Supermax. I mean, in my view, it really should only be reserved for those that are selected to an All-NBA first team. Otherwise, the league will continue to see situations in which teams become poverty franchises for years because of a contract that set them back, or you'll see teams being forced to break up their stars because they simply can't afford them long-term, which is what some believe will eventually happen to Tatum and Brown, who are both on contracts exceeding $300 million. The Supermax is one of the NBA's most powerful tools, but as the old saying goes, with great power comes great risk. For every Jokic or Giannis, there's also a cautionary tale of a Bradley Beal. The question isn't just, can you give out a Supermax contract, but should you? What do you think? Should the NBA keep the Supermax rule in place? Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.
W video from A1 Hoops.
Tom Brady said that quarterback.
We're going to watch that video later, chat. But, yeah, like I said, I genuinely think that it has its positives, but at the end of the day, like the Tatum and Brown, they're most likely going to be separated at some point, just because it's like you have to build a team. You cannot just have a good 3 players. You need a good 6 man. You need a good 8th man. You need bench depth to win. Like, you need bench depth. Look at the Thunder. The Thunder have a bunch of good players. The Pacers have made it this far. Like, the teams that do good now have the best depth. It's no longer, oh, this starting 5 is insane. They have KD, Curry, Clay, Draymond. Like, you need a bench. So that's my take on it. Unfortunately, new CBA is messing all this up. But I do believe that the Supermax needs to be looked back at again. I kind of agree with him. I think that it should only be like all NBA first team. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Chat. We'll see y'all later. Peace.